good to be here with you all tonight. Thank you for coming. Really, we need to talk about this kind of stuff. I think it's great that the school and the community came together on this, and we have resources here. I'll do my best to share my experience with you with addiction and with recovery, and that's all I really can do. I've been asked multiple times, "When did you graduate?" Because share that I was an alumni, and 5 years. I can't believe it's been 5 years. That was the last time it was necessary for me to use drugs, and I'm thankful. My story sounds a lot like that. So if there is hope, that is an important thing to touch on. So one thing I can say that I'm certain of, which there isn't a lot, but something as complex as addiction, is that the first time I picked up a drug and used, it certainly wasn't because I had an overwhelming obsession or compulsion to use drugs. I think that's an important thing to discuss when we talk about addiction. It's a family disease. It is my experience. I should speak to that. I'm no professional. I just have I lived it, and my experience with that is that what's helped me is not to treat, like someone could handcuff me and put me away somewhere and I wouldn't be able to use. That wouldn't help me. So to get down and to dig deep inside and to talk about the difficult things, to talk about family, to talk about what was going on inside of me, to talk about, all the factors that addiction encompasses is important. So it's good to be here. I'm glad that the community is doing this. I was young. I didn't pick up a drug for the first time and decide, I'm gonna get handcuffed. I'm gonna have family difficulties. I'm gonna be thrown out of the house. That wasn't the kind of things on my mind. I don't think, it was hard for me to understand the first time. It was, the first time someone gave me the idea that I might have a problem and that I might be an addict. I associated that with someone I saw in a gutter, someone homeless. I remember going to the city as a kid, these kind of things. And addiction does not discriminate. I've heard that message clearly tonight, and that's another important. This is, Hopewell Valley. I grew up in Montgomery Township. I came to Hopewell. I lived in what some people might call affluent communities, and addiction does not discriminate. It is here. It has touched a lot of lives, and I know it's touched mine and my family's. So saying that, I was a kid and I wanted to have fun. We heard that, and it was attractive. I think it's, the lifestyle can be attractive. The consequences, what we heard in this opening, is not attractive. That's the real story of addiction. I think that's the truth of addiction. That's what it looks like. It's not to be grim, but it's important to talk about what it does to families, what it does to addicts, what it does to people who love addicts, what it does to the people who have to govern a community, law enforcement, schools who are responsible for children. And I had an older brother, and I watched him when he was in high school, and he had friends, and they made it look good. They made partying look good. That was what you were supposed to do. I grew up thinking that that's what you did. I saw it, especially today, and it's not to place blame on society or anything like that. But anyone who watches TV or listens to music or is out anywhere, we see alcohol, drugs. It's attractive and it's available. And growing up, that was what I thought I was supposed to do, and that was the crowd of people I followed. One thing I can speak to also is that in hindsight, I never felt very connected to people, whether it was even my own family. I never felt, as a young age, I felt distant, and people sometimes pointed that out, and stuff. And as a young person growing up, sometimes hearing things about myself, I felt different, whatever that means. And I think those factors played a part in that. I found connection in a group of people who we all felt disconnected, and whatever, outcasts, people who went against the grain, that kind of thing. Again, the lifestyle of what addiction was and where that started. I don't think it started with my picking up that first substance and having a problem. From a young age, I was in trouble in school, a very young age. I acted out, I misbehaved. some things that people might consider attention-seeking behavior. And these are the kind of things that the community sees. These are the kind of things that were seen in the classroom and stuff. So whether there are warning signs or not, I have no idea. But I share it to share what my experience is, and if there's anyone who knows anyone who has a child who's having those kind of experiences, maybe it can be helpful. So that was my growing up. That was my growing up into addiction. The way I see it, the way I, only in hindsight, which I'm thankful I have. So I found myself again a young person. I was 13 or 14 when I started to experiment, and that's an important thing. I think the title of this is the opioid crisis, which is what we're here discussing. But addiction is opioids are a part of addiction. It's a substance and stuff. And I certainly didn't start with opioids, and I started with alcohol and marijuana because when young kids get together and party, a lot of times that's the way it starts. A lot of those kids maybe never did that again. Maybe they did it only on weekends. Maybe they did it only for New Year's. But to take, and the word I heard tonight was intervention, and in the formal sense, I was never had one of those. But I think what we're doing right now would constitute as intervention. What do we do before? We need to be informed before that person, before a child, community member, picks up that habit and is faced with addiction. So I think about that, and I think about the fact that that's where it started with me. So gateway drug, if you want to call it that, that's been my experience and my gateway into that lifestyle. Again, it started off. It wasn't homelessness. It was not handcuffs. It was not consequences. It was fun. It was fun. I can't say it was fun, and I'm not saying that to encourage anyone. I'm saying that to. You might have a child, you might have someone in the community, well, I'm having fun, I'm okay, I don't need help. That was my story. Leave me alone. So those kind of things. And that's the way it started. I'm thankful I was given consequences. Only in hindsight, I was not a happy person. But I'm thankful consequences began quickly. My experience is that addiction progresses. It never gets better. As long as I'm using, as long as I'm involved in that lifestyle. So by the time I came to Hopewell Valley because I was no longer welcome in the town or school where I grew up, down 518 in Montgomery, as a direct result of my involvement with drugs, with alcohol, with older kids, with that crowd, and doing things that you can't do and stuff, and not even, I look back and it's like it never occurred to me that there might be consequences. That was not something. It was the rush. It was how it made me feel. I didn't have to think about the things that bothered me. I didn't have to think about what anyone else was thinking about me. I didn't have to think about any kind of outside social pressures, home life, whatever it is. I think it's fair to say a lot of people use as an escape mechanism whatever it is they're running from, and I'm confident I was running, and that became my real way to deal with things that I didn't want to deal with, and it is not effective. The dangerous part is that it seems effective, is that this is working, everything's okay, this is making me feel better, and then I needed more and more, and consequences got greater. So I found myself, I was 15, and I was in the police station in one of those little rooms with the camera on me, and they did a good job of scaring me. And I was scared. I wouldn't admit it. My exterior was, leave me alone. I didn't do it. I was scared. I felt like, Jesus Christ, I'm 15 years old, and I'm in the police station, and I didn't know what was going to happen and stuff. And I was in school with controlled substances, which you can't do, and was in trouble for distributing controlled substances to other students. All things, again, there is no consequences. There is a disconnect between consequences and my behavior, impulse. I think it's fair to say impulse is a characteristic of addiction. And so I found myself sitting there in all this trouble. Family wasn't happy that I was there and stuff. And I parents don't want to come to the police station to pick up their 15-year-old son who's involved with drugs on school property, and they had a minimal amount of an idea of what was going on. They were shocked, and that was difficult. It was difficult for the family. It was difficult. I wasn't welcome back in that school, so we had to pick up and move. And I think they figured, and so did I, that if we picked up and moved me to a new town with a new start as a young person, I'd be okay, and I wouldn't associate with the people I was associating with, and I would, play sports again and get involved socially and do the kind of things. So again, addiction is a disease. I rolled my eyes at that for a long time until I was faced with accepting that or continuing down that path of self-destruction. So we picked up, moved to a new town, a new start. No one knew who I was, and I didn't know who any of the troublemakers were, so I couldn't find them. And I'm a quiet, reserved person, so I kind of stayed to myself. And I found myself very quickly in the same kind of trouble, involved with drugs and alcohol, involved with the same kind of extracurricular activities where school didn't matter, homework didn't matter. I didn't care about anything. Stuff that, I came home when I wanted to, and those kind of things, and skipping school, all that stuff. Addiction, the more I fell into it, the more I gave up. I gave up my own values. I think, I would say I lost it, but I think I gave it away. There was no ability for me to think that, oh geez, the relationship I have with my parents is disintegrating, let me stop this. It was, I don't care, I have to use. That was where I felt again, I talked about feeling a lack of connection, and in a twisted way I felt connection with the drugs. I felt connection with those people, with being reckless, those kind of things. And I believe, not to personify it, but addiction is evil, and it's powerful. Whether it's heroin, opioids, whatever the substance is, I think to talk about it at its greater core, regardless of substance, it affects whoever the addict is, and it affects the family the same way. So again, I kept doing the same things and kept getting the same results, and it kept getting worse. And I found myself in the same kind of trouble, and for the first time, I would say I felt hopeless. I felt, on the exterior, I presented myself that I didn't care about consequences. Whether it was authority figures here, authority figures in the law, authority figures at home, that was the disposition I had. Leave me alone, I'm okay. Inside, when I was with myself and away from using buddies and all that, I felt hopeless. I thought about things would be better if everything just stopped, if everything, if everything could just go away. By that, I felt at that time everything, my life, and stuff. I didn't want to deal with the mess I was making and the hole I was digging myself in. And I didn't know that there was a solution. I didn't know that there was resources. I didn't know that I could wave the white flag and get help. Fortunately, in hindsight, I got in enough trouble that I was introduced to the Mercer County probation, and I kept getting in enough trouble in school that those two forces were working together without me knowing it for my benefit. And my journey into recovery, I mean, the one memory I have, I can, again, I never wanted to accept responsibility for my part, for what I was doing to myself, what I was doing to others, and I also never wanted to blame, I'm using and it's the drugs. It just never occurred to me. Everyone else was unfair. Every other stress in my life, every emotional thing going on, that was the problem. And the moment anyone suggested that drugs and addiction might be part of the problem I was having, no kidding, it was, I stopped talking to that person, and that was that. In hindsight, becoming dependent on the drugs, there was a fear of, how am I going to live without them? How am I going to live? How am I going to numb myself? How am I going to, everything that I had not dealing with, how was I going to deal with it? And so fear, I heard that word tonight. And I had to make a choice eventually, to accept help, to admit that I needed it, or again, to keep doing what I was doing. And I found myself in enough trouble that taking the mandatory help that was put in front of me was the best way to go. And I was involved with some outpatient programs, but I think what ultimately helped me was starting to accept inside myself that however it happened, genetically, whatever it was, it honestly, it feels like I woke up one day and, oh my God, and it's like those commercials they show on TV, the parent doesn't recognize their child, and that's how I felt about myself. I didn't know what happened. I didn't know how I had gotten that far sucked in, but I felt it for myself that I had a problem and I needed help. And that began, again, I was in legal trouble. I was in trouble at school, and it was suggested and mandated that I attend an anonymous 12-step program, and I did that. And I didn't accept it right away. I don't know of too many people struggling with addiction who are willing to accept help immediately. It's usually a part of that process, and I'm thankful that it's often said that I had to want it for myself. I had to hit bottom, and I've seen, known, touched, spoken with enough people who died before they hit bottom, before they decided that they were done. And it never occurred to me, but someone suggested that maybe if I stopped digging, that could be my bottom. And again, I'm too young. I still want to have fun, and it clearly wasn't fun. The evidence was in front of me. I was not having fun. No one in my life was having fun. It was, awful. But for one day, deciding that why don't I just try? I can remember 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago, down the hall in the counselor's office there, the idea was presented to me that, did you ever try to stop using? Did I ever try? Did I ever honestly try to stop using and think of that as my problem and put that down and see what could happen? And I never tried. That was my solution. That was how I dealt. That was how I dealt with the pain I caused myself, others. So, it truly does. It pulled me in. It's progressive and it keeps pulling. That's my experience with it. With that help, with the help of attending, outside meetings, my journey began with outpatient help. A variety of different things, but a lot of it had to be initiated inside myself. That there was a lot of things I didn't want to do, a lot of things I didn't want to admit, except that I have addiction is a disease, that I can't do it by myself, that I have to admit that I don't know what I'm doing. Reaching out to community resources, these kind of things, letting go of relationships, letting go of people, places, things, all this kind of stuff, and letting go of that lifestyle that I had formed that connection with, that this is what I have, this is all I have, that this is what makes me me, and being willing to let that stuff go and try another way of life, and that's where that began for me. I can tell you 5 years later, still, I would say that the family is slightly fractured, that there's difficult things, that there's, it's a journey and it's a healing process. So that's something that I have to keep in mind, and something to throw out there that, it's not overnight like anything, but there is hope. A recovery is a possibility in a variety of different ways. There's, I try to present that and be totally non-denominational. That it's just important for, in my experience, it's been important for me to identify myself as an addict, and that if I want recovery, abstinence is complete and total abstinence has worked very well for me, and it seems to be the only way, because I tried every other variety of different things, whether it's substitutions, things that were mentioned, those kind of chemical compounds. I found that that's a Band-Aid for me, and it was important for me to accept that what addiction means to me, and that was a total, all mood and mind altering chemicals affect me the same way, and any involvement in that kind of a lifestyle will pull me right back in, and it's work, and it would work for my family and work for a lot of, and it's work for me, but it becomes it's a lifestyle, and a much better lifestyle than the lifestyle I knew when I was in the grip of addiction, when I pushed everything good away from me, when I pushed every relationship, everyone who loved me, and when I lost any kind of, connection with myself and reality. So I'm thankful again that for however it occurred, I believe it's a gift that recovery was presented to me, that there was these resources available. These kind of things, discussions were they were brought to my attention. I was brought to different discussions, different scared straight kind of thing and whatnot, and rejected everyone. I rejected everyone. I know plenty of people who every day was their first day of not using, and they used. So I think it was said in the introduction, never give up, whether it's it's a loved one, if it's someone who, if you're struggling, or if it's a loved one, it's a child, it's whatever, to never give up hope, and no one could save me. I believe I could not save myself. The stars aligned, whatever it is, and I hold on to that hope that I felt that the first day, that wow, it wasn't the first day, it was a week. I didn't use for a week. Oh my God, what happened? And and I held on to that hope that I felt in that moment, and I continue to hold on to that, and I do my best to pass that on, and to carry that to someone else, to know that there is hope, and latch on to it, and offer it into the community. I'll offer it to whoever, a loved one who's struggling, and know that's all I feel I had, looking back, and I think all we have when we're dealing with addiction is to hold on to that hope and light, to deal with something as grim and as real and as this. So thank you for letting me share with you tonight.